No matter how thick my parents thought the walls in our house were, they weren't thick enough. I've lost count of how many times I've lain in bed and listened to Mom and Dad fighting, when they thought we wouldn't hear them. I was at the stage where I almost didn't care anymore, but I couldn't say the same about my younger sister. As soon as the scream started, it was usually only a matter of time before Monica got up and looked for something to distract from our parents' increasingly obvious problems with each other. Most of the time, that distraction was me, as I was the only person in the house. As if on cue, I heard the creak of floorboards right outside my room door, followed by a short pause. The handle on my door turned slowly, and it swung open just enough for Monica to look inside. She always seemed to be worried about waking me up, but even as detached as I was becoming, I still couldn't fall asleep because of the screams. "Come in," I said. Monica carefully entered the room, trying not to step on anything in the dark. She closed the door behind her and came closer to my bed. I reached for the bedside lamp and missed, finding the switch on the second try. With the light coming from the light bulb, I could see my sister's face well enough to know she was upset, although I didn't need to see her to know that. "They're fighting again," she said, as if I didn't know. "Yes, it is," I said. She looked much younger than her 18 years, like a scared girl who wanted everything to be okay. I hated it when she got like this. So insecure in her world and not even able to turn to her parents for comfort. Moreover, it infuriated me that there was nothing I could do about it except create a temporary illusion of security. Why can't they just stop it? "What is it?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. She took another hesitant step toward me, and I finally sat up, pulling off the blanket and throwing it aside. I knew she would want to stay for a while, at least until things calmed down again, but she would never ask. It was as if she was afraid that I would reject her on one of these occasions, and I didn't even want to think about what that might do to her. "Sit down," I said. "It will be over soon. I wish this had never happened. That would be nice, if not more than wishful thinking under the circumstances." My bed was against the wall, and when Monica climbed in next to me, I moved over so we could both lean against it. Once she was comfortable, she pulled on the edge of my blanket and wrapped it around her body. I was sitting on the other half, and it wasn't really cold enough for me to feel the need for it right then. "Do you remember when we were little?" "What is it?" she asked. "Do you think they've always been like this and we just never noticed?" "No," I said, thinking about it for a second. "I think they really loved each other for a while, and maybe they still do. I don't know, but everything is changing. A lot of things are changing. That's changing, isn't it? I think that's what scares me the most." Monica pulled her knees up to her chest, curling into a protective ball. "Because if such things can change, then many other things can change too. For example, maybe they won't always love me either." "Listen, they are, or maybe you won't." She turned her head to me with a neutral expression, but her eyes betrayed her. She was really worried about this possibility. "That's never going to happen," I said, shaking my head with absolute certainty. "Why not?" she insisted. "If Mom and Dad could stop loving each other, then maybe anyone could." "No way. You forget. I had to grow up with you, and I already know all the most annoying things about you. If we were going to hate each other, we'd be doing it already." "Hey, I'm not annoying," Monica said with a hint of a smile. "If you say so, Miss takes my books without asking. It's strange that these pages bend on their own, isn't it? I can't help the fact that you always have the best," she grumbled, "and you're the one who always finishes the cereal and doesn't add it to the shopping list. But you're dealing with it, aren't you? That's what I'm talking about. We have lived together all our lives, and if such things have not separated us, they will never separate us." "I don't know. Do you really think it's just these little things? They must have fallen in love with each other before, right? So if it's not some big secret, then most likely it just accumulates over time." "Maybe you're right." Monica fell silent, and I had nothing more to add, so we just sat together for a while. In the quiet moments that followed, I noticed at some point that the sounds of our parents' quarrel had disappeared. If my sister understood that, she didn't say anything. "It seems safe again," I finally said, hinting that she could walk, but not pushing her out. "Yes," she said, and I got the impression that she understood everything too. Do you mind if I stay a little longer? For example, for a few more minutes. I'm not ready to go back to bed yet. If you want, I was tired, but sleep wasn't a big problem for me. I guess that Monica was also more sleepy than she wanted to admit when she leaned against me and rested her head on my shoulder. I'm just going to stay for a while. Don't let me sleep, she said. All right, I said. As expected, we both fell asleep where we were. I woke up slightly disoriented in a sitting position exactly where I was last night. Monica curled up in my blanket, resting her head on my lap as if it were a pillow. In the morning light, she looked happier, much more like her usual self. All the worries and fears she had already been erased by sleep, and she seemed at peace. I just wanted her to feel like this all the time. I didn't have to get up right away, although I couldn't stay there forever either, and moving would mean waking Monica up. I decided that I would give her some time to recover on her own before I did. Having nothing better to do, I gently stroked her hair, smoothing it out after the night's mess. Unfortunately, no matter how gentle I was, this touch was enough to disturb my sister, and she moved slightly where she was lying before opening one eye. Is it morning already? What is it? She asked. Yes, I said. I'm sorry. I didn't want to stay here all night. Although I asked you to keep me awake, I shrugged my shoulders. It's okay. I don't mind. Monica rolled off my lap, still wrapped in my blanket, but allowing me to move from what had become a somewhat uncomfortable position. You know, I think I like your bed better, she said. Although I don't know why. Maybe a mattress? I suggested. Yes, maybe. Maybe it's just because you're here too. It's nice not to be alone when I wake up. There is something in this that can be said in favor of this. I moved to the edge of the bed, bypassing Monica, who seemed less inclined to start her day right now. Are you getting up already? What is it? She asked. Yes, I'm going to have breakfast. Do you want me to bring you something? No, I do not know how long I will be gone. Good. She could have just fallen asleep again in my absence. But that wasn't really my problem. And my stomach began to seriously demand food. I didn't have time to reach the kitchen before I realized that someone else was ahead of me there. The faint sound and the smell of something cooking registered in my brain just before I turned the corner and my suspicions were confirmed. Mom was standing at the sink with a cup of coffee in her hands and a tired expression on her face. Pancakes were cooking on the stove next to a bowl of dough, and apparently they needed to be turned over. Oh, good morning, Mom said, seemingly taken aback by my appearance. I didn't know you were up. I just got up. I said. I stood in front of her and grabbed a spatula so the pancakes wouldn't burn. I thought it would be nice to cook breakfast for you and your sister, she said. But I'm not sure that I'm really as ready for this as I thought. The fact that she didn't even mention Dad told me something, although it wasn't something I couldn't have guessed. The driveway was visible from the kitchen window, and when I looked, I saw that his car was gone. I wasn't sure if he left last night or early this morning. Anyway, it's been a long time since the four of us had breakfast together, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. I can do it, I said. Are you sure? It's pretty simple. Even I can flip the food over when it starts to brown. Mom gave me a little smile and put her cup on the counter. Okay, thanks. I think I'll go lie down for a few more minutes. Make sure Monica gets up on time and eats. Okay? Of course. I was standing there and waiting for the pancakes to cook wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. But for some reason I stopped there anyway. I was tempted to cook just enough for myself and Monica right now and leave the rest of the dough for later since I didn't expect Mom to be back anytime soon. The only thing is, I really had no idea how well it would be stored. Fortunately, my sister showed up very soon, so I didn't have to wait alone. She hadn't dressed for work yet and was still in her nightgown and bare legs. She instantly perked up when she noticed what I was doing. Did you make pancakes? She said. I didn't even know you could do it. Mom made them, I said. I'm just cooking them. She went back to bed. Monica frowned for a second, catching the subtext. Well, thank you anyway. She took a plate and helped herself to a couple of ready-made pancakes as well as syrup from the refrigerator before sitting down at the table. Actually, maybe it's not such a bad idea for us to cook more. You know, she said, pouring some syrup on her plate. Yes, why is that? Well, just because it's getting a little, chaotic here. You may be right, but you know that my talents in this field are limited. It's okay. I can teach you something. You won't have someone to take care of you forever. Someday you'll have to learn. If you say so. When I returned home that evening, at first it seemed to me that nothing had changed since I left. It wasn't until I found Monica in the kitchen that I realized something had happened. There were several open jars on the kitchen table, indicating that dinner had been started, but then left unfinished. My sister was sitting on the floor by one of the cupboards, hugging her knees and staring vacantly at the floor. She looked ready to cry at any second. So, what's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral and waiting for her answer. I was going to cook dinner, she said. Dad came back and he and Mum were talking. We thought maybe he would stay. We could all be together and all that. Then he left. Angry. I haven't seen my mum yet and maybe she's locked herself in her room again. Damn it, I said softly, more to myself than to Monica. I was really losing patience with our parents. They needed to come up with something so that their problems would stop being our problems. We shouldn't have to deal with this all the time, especially Monica, who definitely didn't take it very well. After a couple of seconds, I made a decision. Come on, I said. Let's go. I held out my hand to help her up, and she took it with some hesitation. Where are we going? What is it? She asked. Anywhere. Somewhere that's not here. We'll go eat, and then maybe we'll come back, or maybe we won't. I don't know. Monica tilted her head slightly as she stood up, then shrugged her shoulders. All right, she said. I led her back to my car, which I had gotten out of just a few minutes ago, and drove off. Not quite sure where I was going. She mostly looked out the window and didn't say anything without being prodded. So where would you like to go? I asked. I do not know, she said. It doesn't really matter. That's right. It doesn't matter. So we can go wherever you want. She turned to me for a moment, and her slightly sad expression was replaced by thoughtfulness. Do you remember the place we used to go sometimes when we were younger? What is it? She asked. The one that Mom and Dad took with them when they didn't want to cook anything? Yes. Is it still relevant? We could find out. I immediately understood which institution she was talking about, since it was the only restaurant we went to almost regularly. It was kind of a family-run place, a step or two away from fast food, but where you could bring your kids and not worry too much about dressing them up and making them behave. I was pretty sure he was still there, even though it had been a couple of years since. I was last there anyway. We started driving in the wrong direction, so I had to take a roundabout route back to the area I wanted to get to. Monica still didn't talk much, but from time to time, when I looked around, I noticed that she was paying more attention to where we were. It seemed like a good sign to me. The place was exactly as I remembered it, albeit with minor changes since my last visit. The table setting was different from what I imagined in my head, and some of the decorations on the walls were unfamiliar. However, nothing too grandiose. As soon as we sat across from each other in the booth, I was able to study my sister's reaction more closely. She continued to look around, and her lips lifted from time to time, as I assumed from happy memories of the past. I was glad she could focus on them and not on how things had changed since then. When the waitress came over and handed each of us a menu, Monica immediately opened hers and looked through the options while I lingered for a moment. Can I get you something to drink while you decide? The waitress asked. I met Monica's gaze, but I didn't wait for her answer. Yes. Can we have 2 milkshakes, please? I said, 1 chocolate, 1 strawberry. I had some memories of my own, and I knew that strawberry milkshake was always Monica's goal to get rid of our parents. She was more successful than not, too. You don't have to. Monica began. 2 milkshakes, please. I repeated to the waitress, who nodded and turned away. Are you really going to tell me you don't want to be alone? I asked, raising an eyebrow at my sister. No, but I don't know. You didn't have to do that. That's all. I know you're paying and all that because I don't have any money with me. So, I'm going to tell you how to make a milkshake if I want. I interrupted. Seriously, don't worry about it right now. Okay? We'll just have time when we do what we want and don't care about the consequences. Monica giggled slightly when I swore and instinctively looked around to see if anyone had heard me. "You're supposed to be a good influence on me, you know?" She said. "No, I'm supposed to be your brother. And sometimes that means setting a bad example if it's in your best interest. For example, sometimes you just need to forget about your problems for a while, even if it doesn't really help solve them." I don't know. That sounds like some kind of bad advice. Or maybe a damn good piece of advice. I'm not sure. We both grinned conspiratorially, like children who had just heard the word for the first time and knew we shouldn't say it. We didn't really fight that much, even though we were more than old enough that there was no reason why we couldn't if we wanted to. There was something about this place too. Something about the fact that we were only there with our parents, which made bad behavior seem like something more than it really was. "And here are your drinks," the waitress said, appearing almost imperceptibly at our table. "Thank you," Monica and I said at the same time. My sister immediately took a tentative sip, threw a straw and nodded approvingly, appreciating the result. Then we had to place an order for which I had not prepared properly. I chose the burger with fries because it was usually a fairly safe choice, and anyway, I wasn't there for the food. You know, when it's just the two of us here, it's a bit like a date, Monica said as soon as we were alone again. "I mean, except that you're obviously my brother." "Yes, I think it's something like that. Only if that were the case, I would take you somewhere where the kids wouldn't be running," I said, meaningfully looking towards the family a couple of tables away from us, where parents were having a hard time keeping their children in their seats. "Oh, it's not that bad. Besides, I chose it. Remember?" "I remember. I think I'm lucky it's a cheap date. Or maybe I just have plans for later, and I'm luring you with a false sense of security." I smiled and rolled my eyes, not believing her for a second. If she really wanted to do something after we were done, I didn't mind. As long as she was happy, I didn't have to worry about her. In the end, we just sat and talked for much longer than I expected. Long enough that we would probably have become a real nuisance if the restaurant had been a little more lively. When we got back in the car, Monica immediately picked up the radio, found a station she liked, and turned up the volume. She looked at me as if she wanted me to fight with her about it, but I didn't say anything. When we got home, I wondered for a moment if anyone would be interested in where we had gone. Dad was still out, and when it came down to it, I wasn't sure if Mummy was in the car, and even noticed that we were gone. Monica walked next to me to the door, then darted forward and stood in front of it, blocking my way. She clasped her hands behind her back and looked at me innocently. "If this was a real date, you'd have to kiss me right now, you know," she said. "You think so, don't you?" There was a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, and I realized that she was just teasing me. Maybe that's what made me do it. The realization that she didn't really expect anything more than to get a reaction from me. Anyway, I kissed her. At first, her body only expressed surprise when I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around her waist. Her lips didn't react either, then suddenly dug into mine as she recovered from the initial shock. I didn't plan on holding the kiss for long, just enough to emphasize some idea, but it disappeared pretty quickly. For some reason, as soon as I started, I couldn't let go right away. I couldn't just pull away from my sister, even if I probably should have. There was supposed to be something inherently strange about kissing her, something physical or mental that would have set her apart from other girls, but it just wasn't there. Eventually, we ran out of air and had to separate for a while, but I never let her go, and all the while our faces were no more than 5 centimeters apart. We just stared at each other, breathing heavily and trying to figure out what the other was thinking. Then, as if it had been agreed in advance, we moved forward again. Monica's hands rested on my shoulders, and it seemed to me that she stood on tiptoe, little to compensate for her slight lack of height, because suddenly her face was on a level with mine. She felt exactly how a girl should feel, as wonderfully soft and perfect as any of my previous experiences, only somehow even more so. Only when her lips parted, either in invitation or otherwise, that I came to my senses. Kissing my sister is one thing, using language is taking it to a completely unjustified level. I pulled away when she tried to snuggle up to me for a second, then abruptly pulled away too and looked away in embarrassment. "Maybe this has gone too far," she said after a moment of awkward silence. "Yes, I suppose so," I agreed. I mean, there's nothing special about it, right? But if someone saw something like this, they would probably get the wrong idea. That's right. Monica nodded quickly. I probably should have known that you wouldn't back down from such a challenge, but they wouldn't have realized that it was just a joke. Of course, they would be right. It wasn't just a joke. There was something else to it, even if I wasn't entirely sure what it was. Monica finally remembered what was blocking the doorway and turned to enter the house. I followed her, still wanting to take her in my arms again, but forcing myself to behave normally. She stopped before heading to her room and looked at me with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. It's okay if I come to you again tonight, will it be okay? What is it? She asked. I could give a lot of answers, some better than others. The problem was that I didn't know exactly what I should tell her. After I kissed her a few moments ago, it might have been preferable to keep a little distance, but I really didn't want to do that. Besides, it was supposed to be just one time. There had never been even a hint of something like this before. Of course, I said simply. Okay, she said, and a semblance of a smile appeared on her lips before she turned away. From me again. I hoped it wasn't the wrong answer. It was a peaceful evening. No drama from the parents, and I don't think I even saw Monica again before I went to bed. It occurred to me that if she had been in a more comfortable state of mind, she might not really have needed to talk to me again. With these thoughts in mind, I allowed myself to start falling asleep without bothering, to wait for her. I had not quite fallen asleep when my attention was attracted by the opening of the door, followed by my sister. At that moment, I wasn't awake enough to approach or greet her without much more effort than I would have liked if she hadn't said something first. In any case, it wasn't necessary, as she just lifted my covers enough to slip under, then with me and curl up on an almost impossibly small area of the mattress. My bed wasn't that big, but she seemed determined not to bother me and managed to arrange herself, so that our bodies barely touched. Good night, I heard her weak voice. I muttered something similar in response, and after a few moments I fell asleep. That night I dreamed about Monica. Actually, it wasn't her at first. Just a fuzzy image of a girl I could have sworn I knew but couldn't remember. As usual with my dreams, later I didn't remember all this, and I couldn't necessarily make sense of what I remembered. She didn't mind me looking at her and seemed to want me to touch her too. Although I had problems with it, I couldn't seem to control where I touched her. It was around this point that I began to suspect that I might be dreaming. As soon as this thought occurred to me, it became quite obvious that this was the case. There was too much nonsense in the whole scenario for it to be otherwise. As soon as I came to my conclusion and remembered that I was in bed next to Monica before I fell asleep, the girl became my sister. Maybe that's what she's been like all this time. Her body was still not clearly defined, and there was no way it could be completely accurate, since I couldn't see it, but the face definitely belonged to her. For some reason, my hand stayed where it was on the belly of the girl, now my sister. I couldn't take it away, and she smiled encouragingly as if she didn't want me to do it. However, I couldn't digest it, and then I woke up. For a second, I was disoriented, not by the room, but by the person next to me. It was Monica, of course, but somehow we got closer while we were sleeping, and our bodies were pressed against each other. In fact, we were hugging when I allowed myself to admit it. My hand was on the exposed skin of her stomach, and then it became clear why my actions were so restrained as they were in my dream. My brain didn't want to process sensory information when it had usable real information that it could supply me with. As soon as I realized how close I was to touching my sister inappropriately, it became very clear to me that I needed to change my position. Getting her shirt back to its original state without waking her up would be difficult, but I couldn't leave it where it was. Except for her panties, she was wearing nothing under the hem of her shirt, and I didn't want her to see it, even if she realized that I didn't do it on purpose. Monica moaned softly. She moved a little and raised her hand to squeeze mine before I could take it away. "Are you awake?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, and I was almost ready to believe that she was still asleep when she spoke. "Yes," she said. "How long?" "I don't know. A few minutes. Something like that. I didn't want to, in your shirt and all that. I know you were asleep. At first I thought you were awake, then I realized that you weren't." Monica didn't show the slightest sign of rejection. Besides, if she wasn't asleep, she took her hand away on purpose. If you let me go, I can roll over and give you some space. I said, why? I'm loving it. It's nice to be around, isn't it? He was really nice. I was wearing only shorts, and Monica's shirt was unbuttoned, and I could feel her skin pressing against mine. Warm, delicate skin. That's not the point, I said. She didn't answer right away, but then she took her hand away from mine, allowing me to break contact with her if I wanted to. Do you want me to leave? What is it? She asked. I didn't want her to leave, but it raised the question of exactly what I was trying to achieve. No, I said. Good. Maybe you should straighten your shirt after all, just so it's not all crumpled up. It was a weak excuse for my request, but I hoped Monica would just accept it as it is. She stirred and raised her hands to grab her shirt, but instead of pulling it back, she pulled it over her head and threw it away. That wasn't what I meant, and you know it, I said. I know, but I like it when you hug me like that. I want to feel you. Well, she could feel me well. I suppose I could have rolled back at any moment if I really wanted to, but I didn't. Monica put her hand on top of mine and squeezed it tightly where it lay on her stomach. She fully expected us to spend the night like this. It's not going to work, I said. Why not? Because sister or not, you're still a girl, and you're barely wearing any clothes right. Now, I didn't know if she had felt it yet or not, but she would soon. To you. Do I need to take care of this? What is it? She asked softly. Will everything be all right then? I'll be, but I can't do it here with you. I won't look, she promised. You can just do it, and then we can go back to sleep. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of for me. Come on, everyone does that. Even I do that sometimes. Wait, really? Monica rolled over on the spot until she was facing me, no matter what it did in the dark. What? You thought I didn't do it? What is it? She asked. I know I'm your little sister, but do you really think I'm that innocent? I never thought about it, I guess. No, you wouldn't have thought. I didn't know what else to say, and because of Monica's changed posture, I couldn't even get comfortable without risking touching her in the wrong place. Monica, what are you doing? I said, well, it's difficult with you, and I don't want to leave. It doesn't mean that. I stumbled when my train of thought was rudely interrupted. Please, she whispered, just so we can go back to sleep, that's all. Her words didn't convince me as much as her hand. Just so we can sleep, I repeated. That's right, and then we won't have to think about it anymore. We can forget that this ever happened. I seriously doubted that I would forget something like this, but I still didn't take a single step to stop it. The only concession I made in this situation was to roll onto my back and give her better access. Monica stroked me for a couple of minutes, eventually seeming to gain confidence in what she was doing. However, she was in no hurry, no matter what she said, and the movements of her hand were slow and deliberate. I have to be careful, otherwise I'll be all worked up by the time I'm done with you, Monica said. Then maybe you'll have to take care of yourself, too, I said. Would you mind that? Nothing could be more strange than this. Actually, it could be. She let go of me and got up on her knees. Suddenly, the room became bright when she turned on my lamp, and I blinked quickly while my eyes adjusted. The most obvious consequences, and what I immediately focused on, was that my sister's body became visible. Regardless of whether it made sense to turn on the lights or not, Monica was as aware of this fact as I was. She bit her lip nervously, waiting for the reaction she knew she was going to get from me. Not quite sure what it would be. Why did you do that? I asked, so that we can see. Do you want me to turn off the lights again? No, I think I like what I can see right now. Monica smiled shyly, and I reached out to put my hand on her leg. I ran my fingers along her thigh and up to her stomach, tracing the soft curves of her body. Are you serious about this? What is it? She asked. Yes, it is. I do not know why it took me so long to realize that you have grown up. You're not just a little girl anymore. You've always been too big a brother to notice that. I'm sorry. Although now I notice. You kind of would have to. She was right. It didn't matter who it was, although it was different with her. My thoughts went back to the moment we kissed, and combined with the current image she presented, I had to reconsider my opinion of her quite significantly. It was impossible to keep thinking about her completely platonic when she aroused feelings in me that a younger sister simply shouldn't be capable of. "May I?" "What is it?" she asked, settling over me. She sank lower and lower until she almost sat on my leg. I had no idea if it was a conscious decision or if she was just following her instinct. "I don't think it's going to work," I said. "I know, but I can't. I don't want it to be too weird. It's a little late for that. Just do what you have to do." "Is this normal?" "What is it?" I asked. It would be difficult for me to say no to anything at this stage. "Yes, but," as her pace accelerated, she leaned forward to lean on her hands. I couldn't help myself. It took her a moment to come to her senses. Then she looked at me a little embarrassed. "I guess it still doesn't help you much," she said. "It's all right," I said. The front of her panties was soaked, and it looked like she was uncomfortable wearing them for a long time. Besides, I still wanted to get them out of the way for my own purposes. I watched for any signs of reluctance on my sister's part. I felt my sister's arms wrap around my back. I stopped instantly and stared at my sister, realizing that this was definitely going too far, but I couldn't pull away on my own. "It's all right," she whispered. There was no doubt or hesitation about it. At that moment, she probably would have done everything I asked, and for that matter, I would have done the same for her. Monica was still clutching me tightly, and all it took was for me to succumb to her, and I was worried that I might be putting too much weight on her, but she refused to let go of. All I could hear was her ragged breathing in my ear. For a few precious moments, Monica was my whole world, and everything else could cease to exist. I didn't care, but it wouldn't last long. "I've gone too far for that. Just let me go for a second, baby," I said, "just for a second." Slowly and with obvious reluctance, she did as I asked, and I rolled off her onto the bed. She immediately snuggled up to me again, curling up on my chest, as if losing contact with me even for a second was unbearable. I didn't mind and let her settle in while I was recovering. There was a long period of almost complete silence before Monica finally broke it a few minutes later. "Everything will be fine tomorrow, right?" she said. "It's not going to ruin everything, is it?" "It's going to be okay," I said. "I promise. I won't let anything happen to us." "Okay, good. Except we're kind of not brother and sister anymore. Not like they used to be. We just did what brothers and sisters don't do." "So what?" "Nothing can stop me from being your brother. Nothing." But I kissed her before she could say anything else and held her until she relaxed, and I was pretty sure she had stopped arguing. When I looked at her again, she only met my gaze for a moment before closing her eyes. "Good night," I said. "Good night," she replied sleepily. My lamp was still on, and I couldn't reach it without pushing Monica away, so I left it burning. The light she gave me allowed me to watch my sister as she slowly fell asleep next to me. I tried my best to stay awake as long as possible, but eventually I gave up too, and we spent the rest of the night together entwined in each other's arms. End.